Most of the software we are coding contains a lot of forms and are usually grouped in workflows. And we found a way to generate technical sketches, and we now hold all our developers accountable to create these technical sketches even before coding. My name is Till Carlos, and we talk about how we can increase the effectiveness of software development teams. And we're doing so by showing this on a YouTube channel, how I and my team work together and how we can get all better. And today we're talking about the technical sketches for form applications. And before we dive in, I wanted to talk about who this is for. This is usually for the discussion between software project stakeholders and developers. So for example, projects that have many forms and many wizards where forms get interconnected. This is for developers who need to have a discussion, a base of discussion, to ask someone to review what they're about to do. This is also for people who want to challenge the UX designers. Let's say the designer gives you something and it's just going to be a bit too complicated to code, so you can give them a technical sketch and show them to make it simpler. It is also for project managers to ask this as a commitment from the development team to think before they code, which has been proven beneficial in our case. And it is also good for project managers who have the suspicion that the UX does not cover all edge cases. So what we're talking about here, I want to give as an example because I cannot show you the real thing from our client projects where we have this implemented, but just to give you a bit of an idea, we have been making multiple of these, and we usually attach links to these slides. This is a Google Drive that we're using for this. So we have been using these links into the merge request. So every time the developer makes a merge request for a bigger feature, they have to create the technical sketch first. Okay, so now how can we make a technical sketch for forms? I found this example here, and I think we can work along that. So this is something on Dribbble. This Julian made this kind of sketch here, and you can probably hire him if you want, but this is good for our example. So now we're going through, we are looking into this in ExcaliDraw. Here's the link again. And we are now looking into how we can make a technical sketch for this kind of workflow. And important for us here, it is that we are talking mostly about the data model. We don't talk so much about how the framework that we're using, let's say using Python Django or whatever, something that has an MVC pattern. We don't really need to talk about the controllers here. This might be another discussion that the developers can do. But important for us is the data storage. So let's say in this case, we're talking about an event. So we start with an event model, and the event probably has a location. So it's either physical or virtual. Okay, if it's a physical location, we might put another place in there because it might repeat. And I've explained this before. In our database model, we just use belongs to. So the event belongs to a place. So in this case, we know that there is a foreign key here for the event, and this is a primary key on place. If this notion is not exactly clear to you, look into my website. We have a description about how we use this kind of model. Okay, so first we have the events, and now we need to add those kind of data points here. Let's say we have a frequency where the event repeats, or only once. We have a date and so on. Let's put the data in here. We also have the name of it, which comes here. So what is important is we want to separate this wizard a bit. So let's say right now, this is the first step of the wizard. Okay, let's put this here. We make a line here. So this is the first step, and this is the second step, and this is the third step. So on the first step, we only want to write down, not even the place yet, this comes later. Let's move this over to here. Okay, so first we only start with the name and a description, I think. I don't know exactly what this is, but I think it's a description. And we probably also have the owner because we are the logged in user. Let's say we are the author of the event. So when we're on the first step here, we only have these things. Now the user clicks on these wizards, so can they navigate back or forth? I think that is a question, but I think this is fine. We don't want to lock in the user. We have a back button, we have a next button. So here the user only has the event, and there is something here which I don't know what it is. I don't want to guess it right now. We just leave it out. Okay, so on the second step, the event now has a place. Great. And we also have a repetition. So the repetition means we now need to figure out a way to make repeating events. It's been some time since I made a repeating events in an app, but we can probably do this by, we could make another model. That's possible, but I think we should not do this here right now. We should just say it's repetition. Maybe do some kind of repetition model, or we have something in the some way to store this. So repetition would be every 2 weeks. Okay. So if we keep it very simple, we just say repetition, and then in the repetition we have configuration of the repetition. Let's say I'm not saying this is the best way to do things, right? If you still want to criticize this and have the great idea how to do this, please leave a comment below. Okay, let's say this is a repetition, and in this repetition we have the JSON that has all these things. Like we store how many, what's the unit, what's the repetition unit, what's the end, and so on. And then it would create this here as a preview. Okay, that's cool. What we then need to do, and this doesn't really belong to the database model, but it's kind of still important. So maybe we just add it here. And the idea with technical sketches is we are really free to use whatever we want. So if we're just saying this is now starts repeat event job, then this is totally cool. Okay, so the repeat event job would then take the parameter of the event ID, and then we would also have something where it starts at like launch event, and then you would then say the event gets launched. What we could do every time the event ends or on every day. So this is something I'll leave this here for you to decide what you want to do. But I just wanted to say maybe we want to change this a bit to make sure that the actual job doesn't look like a database table. Okay, cool. Important is that this job does not get launched yet. So I'm going to move this here, because let's say the person cancels the event, we should not hit up that event. We should do this once we're actually saving it. Okay, now we have the event, we have the place. We're just going to copy this right now in our Excalidraw, and it doesn't need to be Excalidraw. It's better to have something where everybody can access that. This is for the sake of YouTube right now, but you could, for example, just use something in Google Suite or Figma or whatever. But important is that the whole database model gets really visible for all the team members. They know documented why we use certain things. I mean, you can also just use code, comments in the code, which is already better than nothing. But having a diagram usually makes sense. Now we have this, but now we have guests. So how do we deal with guests? So let's say the UX designer would know name or email address. Do we have users? So do we have like a user list? Is that inside an app with users, or is that just a list of people that we're going to invite via email, right? So we should have something here where we say, let's say guest list or invited guest. And the invited guest would probably be, or guest, let's say it's a invitation. The invitation then goes to the event, but also goes to a user. And now it's important, what do we do with a user that's not invited? So maybe we need something like an invitable. So now this is interesting. Now we actually get into the point where another senior developer would be able to check that. So maybe we just want to have an invitable as like a concern or a polymorphic, and the invitable could be on the one side also a user or just an invited guest. And now the invitable would then be able to decide. And then, okay, we want to repeat the event. We want to invite. Cool. I think now we're good here. Some settings, we would add them here. Guests can invite. And now it's interesting because we actually have this list of invitations. We have the repeat event job. We probably also need a guest invitation job. And this will get triggered by just throwing in a list of invitables. So we go via event.invitations invitable each, and then invitable. So then we would just schedule job, and then we would send those out. Important, for example, now if we now talk with the UX designer, we could tell them, okay, so once you hit save event, we are sending those out. And then maybe the UX designer might say, oh, but I wanted to have like an undo button or whatever. And then this whole thing changes. But by just showing the UX designer that this is what they design in their own world, right, where they're not technical, they would see what are the implications of all this. And also, what happens if an email address is not reachable? Is there any error? Where does the error get pop up? Those are the questions the UX designers usually don't talk about or don't think about. So this is why having a strong developer making the technical sketch first is a huge asset for the whole development process. What do you think? Leave a comment down on the YouTube video or look into my blog where we have more content like this almost every day.